So let me say a proper welcome to everybody and introduce those who are here who are taking part. So we've got two other members of the team here besides myself. My name's Barry Osborne and we've got Joy Howell. Joy is our children's ministry advisor. Joy has only been working with the organisation a short time, but she's got lots of experience. Tell us a little bit about yourself, Joy, would you please?
Yeah, good morning, everybody. My name's Joy. My background is in primary education. I worked in primary education for 16 years, all the way through that time. And actually, from when I was a teenager, I got involved in helping with children's work myself in my own church. And for the last 7 years, I've been working with a few different organisations, leading in children's and youth work, doing schools work, all work that's connected with Christianity, with the Bible, but working with predominantly primary school age children, but also with teenagers as well. So that's a little bit about me.
Thank you, Joy. And also we have hiding in the background, Gordon Banks. Gordon is chair of Rural Mission Solutions Trustees. Gordon works regularly on webinars with me. He's a co-presenter. And Gordon is our backroom man today. He'll be picking up your questions and trying to respond to them and interrupting Joy from time to time, perhaps, with the questions. But Joy, thanks everybody for being here. Let's move on. Joy, you've got control and we ask you to carry on with the presentation.
Okay, thank you, Barry. So let's start off by thinking about our objectives for this session. What are we going to be working through? So we're going to think about where you currently are, where you might be with children and families work, and where you might want to be, what you see happening in the future, because we need to start, obviously, from where you are. We need to know what you need to do, so to help you to know what you need to do before reshaping or before starting something new. It may feel as though there's a huge amount to do, and knowing where to start may be difficult, but hopefully this session will help you with just knowing where to start, and that's the starting point. And to have an understanding of your legal obligations before getting started. For some people, thinking about the legal side of things and the things they need to do is actually quite off-putting, and some people don't run children and families work because they don't know what to do. So hopefully we'll give you an outline to that and give you a starting point. Before we go any further, we're going to ask you to take part in a short poll.
I think this is really important because some of you will already be quite experienced with children's work. Others might be beginning. Some of you already have got programs up and running and are looking for resources and information. Some may be wanting to start from scratch. So we're going to ask you to take part in this poll. And if the system works properly, which seems to be doing, we ask you to click on whatever is appropriate to you. So if you have no existing ministry to children, or you plan to start something soon, or your church has a regular event, you run open book at the school or something similar, working with the local school, or you run Messy Church, just give you a few moments just to respond to that, and we'll put the results up once we have them. And sharing the information. Okay, here we go. So you can see what the outcome was. So the majority of you say your church has got something regularly happening for children. About roughly the same number either have nothing at the moment or are using open the book at school. And we have quite a few doing Messy Church. Okay, so that's helpful. We've got some idea. So I would say the majority of you have got a degree of experience in the process. So thank you all for taking part. Okay.
Okay, thank you. So why do we do children's work? It's a very well-known verse from the Bible. Jesus said, "Let the children come to me and do not stop them, because the kingdom of heaven belongs to such as these." And for me, that verse really says it all. Jesus welcomed the children. We should be doing the same. And you'll notice that verse says the kingdom of heaven belongs to such as these. It doesn't say it will belong to such as these. Quite often we hear people talk about children as being the church of the future, but children really need to be a part of the church of now, a part of the family of the church in the present time, a part of God's kingdom. So we have responsibilities. It's our responsibility to lead children to God's kingdom, to help them to feel a part, to know how they can talk to God and learn about God. It's our responsibility to help and enable them to grow in their faith. And it's our responsibility to encourage them to be kingdom builders for themselves. These things are a privilege to be able to do these things, but they're also, it can seem like a daunting task, but we're not alone. We need to have a can-do attitude. We can do this. We're not alone. We have God with us. We can draw on the experience of other people. So, Children's and Families Ministry, we've just thought about, in that poll, about where are you now, about what you're hoping for. Think about what you're hoping to see that might be different in a year's time. Maybe you just want to tweak things that you're doing. Perhaps you want to get something new started and actually get children in. Perhaps you're thinking of reshaping or restarting something you're already doing. Perhaps you have a very small group of children and wondering what you can do with them. So you're probably thinking, where do we start? Well, these are just some of the things that you need to think about. You need to think about your team. You need to think about your skills and your team's skills. You need to think about your venue and your facilities, your time, and your community provision and the needs that your community has. And the most important starting point of all is prayer. We must start with prayer. We can have lots of ideas. We may be able to attract lots of children and give them a great time and entertain them. But we want the children to be able to know God. We want them to be part of the church. So we need to seek what God wants to do in our church. So pray alone, pray with others, but always make sure that prayer is the starting point. So your team, who will be working with you? If you're going to do children's work, you can't do it on your own. You've got to have somebody else with you. Ideally, you should have at least 3 people that share your passion, and if possible, others to support in the background. If you don't have that number of people, then think about working with another church. There may be another church in your small community, in your village, and maybe they've got 1 or 2 people with this passion as well, and you can think about working together. I realise in small churches that the word team might seem like an ambitious word to use. The people who are going to be doing the essential work need to have a passion for working with children. They need to enjoy children. They need to have patience and at least some ability to communicate with children. The age of those people doesn't matter. Having some understanding of where children are now is quite important. But as I say, age doesn't matter. Children will relate to people who are quite close to their own age, and they'll also relate to people who are the same ages as their grandparents. And the different ages of people working with children all bring different experience and different skills. So just think about who can do this with you. You need to think about the skills that you and your team have, and you need to use the gifts and the skills that God has given to you. You may have skills in music, in craft, in storytelling, in leading games, and you need to shape your activity or your event around your gifts and skills. I'm saying that because it's very easy to look at the church that's just down the road and or in the next village and think, oh, they're doing that and it's working for them, so we need to do the same. But it might be that something that they're doing is it involves a lot of music and you might not have anybody who's musical. It might be that what they're doing involves a lot of craft and you might not have anybody who's good at putting craft together. So you need to start with the gifts and the skills that God has given to you.
Joy, can I come in there and just say that we had a wonderful children's program we started in a village, a small village, and a small church. But because we did exactly what you're saying, we had those that were enthusiastic and willing together, and we looked at what skills we had. Now, one of our team was very, very good at the storytelling, and another one was particularly good at craft. Now, what actually happened, each team, sorry, each time when we were doing the planning and we knew what the theme was going to be, then the craft person worked out what they wanted to do, and they had their own resources that they used to use, books and information on craft, and they drew on that. So the craft was always brilliant, and they had that organized. And we had somebody good with storytelling. And you're talking about older people, sort of the grandparent generation, and sometimes you could get an older person who's absolutely brilliant at storytelling. In a school, often storytelling, Joy, teachers have a sort of corner of the classroom that they particularly use. Is that a good thing to do if you have a storytelling? Because the stories are, perhaps some would say that's the most important part of the program.
Yeah, I'm absolutely passionate about storytelling, and children, we'll come back to this a little bit later on, but children really do enjoy listening to stories. Almost all children enjoy listening to stories, and there are so many different ways of doing it. Having a story corner, yeah, if that works for you, if you've got the space, again, it's about thinking about the space that you've got, the people that you've got. As I say, I'll mention storytelling a bit later, but if you don't have people that have got storytelling skills, I would implore you to find a really good book of Bible stories. If you don't feel able to just tell them, then find a good book and practice reading them and read them for children. But it's a really important part. And you were saying about different people using their different skills, Barry, and that's exactly how it works in our church. I'm absolutely hopeless with craft. When I tell people I'm a primary school teacher and that I do children's work, everybody expects me to be good at craft, and I'm not. And I don't particularly like craft, but I've got people in my church who do and are fantastic about it. And we talk together about our theme, and I work out the music and the storytelling, and somebody else works out the great games, and somebody else works out the craft. So it's important to be able to work together and work as a team. Okay, so moving on. Be practical. We've just talked about this a little bit. Use what the different members of your team can do. Some people might say, I'm not good with children, but I can pray. They might never show their face at one of your children's activities, but if they're praying in the background, they are doing a vital part of your work. And maybe you can get them to pray at exactly the right time every week. I mean, it doesn't matter when we pray, but people who will pray are really important. You may have people who say, I'm not good with children, but I will come and make drinks, or I'll come and wash up, or I will come and help you to set up before you start, or tidying up afterwards. Use these people as well. And if people's first answer is, oh, I'm not good with children, I can't do that, then just ask them to think about whether there's something they can do in the background, because all of these things are important. Need to think carefully about timing. If you're starting something from scratch, or if you're thinking about reshaping something, which day of the week are you going to run something? You need something that works for you as the adults that will be running it. You also need something that will work for the children in your community. If, for example, there's a really successful club of some sort, sports club or something that runs in your village hall on a Tuesday evening, and you start your thing on a Tuesday evening, then straight away you're going to hit a barrier. So find out, do your homework, find out what's going on for local children already, and sort out which day is going to be the best to do it. Think about the time of day. Obviously, the timing depends on who you want to come. If you're thinking of setting up a toddlers group for preschool children, then that can be in the daytime when school children are at school. But obviously, if it's going to be for school children, then it needs to be after school. And I'm sorry if I'm stating what's obvious here. It does sound very obvious, but I did once hear about a church that decided to run a holiday club, and they got everything prepared, and they'd done lots of preparation, and they'd sent out all the invitations, but they were actually planning to have it before the schools had broken up. So understandably, they didn't get many children. I think they learnt from that and they didn't do that again. But obviously, you need to think about that. Think about the time of day. What time do children go to bed? Depending on what age of child you're aiming it at. How long is it going to run for? Be realistic about that. I would probably say that you're better to start with something shorter and get longer, rather than start with something that you think, oh, we'll do 2 or 3 hours, and then find you can't actually keep going for that long. I would say initially between an hour and a half is probably enough. And if you want to extend it from that, then you can extend it. Think about the team and their time. Carrying on from that, be realistic about their time. If you start something on a weekly basis, weekly is a big commitment. And if you've got helpers who are in work all day, or helpers who are retired and they like to go off on holidays in term time, of course, who wouldn't, then weekly is a big commitment. So think carefully about that. Doing something well on a monthly basis is better than trying to do something on a weekly basis and finding that you're overstretched and you can't keep it going. So really think carefully and be realistic about the time. For some churches, even trying to do something on a monthly basis may be too much to get going. So you can even think about doing 4 really good events during the year. So there are obvious times that lend themselves: just before Christmas, around Easter time, around the summertime, and around harvest or Halloween. And of course, those fit in with school terms as well. So planning 4 really good events where you can put lots of time into planning them and getting them well prepared, it is better than trying to do something weekly and finding that you just can't do it. You need to think about your venue and your facilities. What space do you have? What won't work in your space? So, for example, if you've got pews in your church, then leading games where children might want to run around, and children do have a lot of energy, they do like to run around, but obviously that won't work in some spaces. So you need to think carefully about how you can use your space. If you are limited with space, or if there are restrictions in your space, then is your church actually the best place to be running it? Or is there a school hall or a village hall that you might be able to use instead? Just think about that. Think about the facilities that you have. Having access to toilets is really essential. And I would say having access to running water so that you can make drinks for children, or just give them water to drink, having something like that, I think is really essential as well. When you're thinking about your space as well, something that I haven't put on the PowerPoint but I think is really important is thinking about the acoustics. What is the sound like in your building? So in my church, we've got our main church hall, and then we've got another hall out at the back, which is great for playing games, but acoustically it's very, very sharp. So when the children start making a lot of noise, it really is noisy. In the church, we've got a lot more soft furnishings. We've got carpets and we've got soft chairs and curtains, which means when we're singing or playing noisy games, the noise is more absorbed. So just think about the acoustics of the different places that you've got and what's going to work well.
Joy, can I come in again? Because I know that that what you said is so helpful, but if the children are boisterous and very noisy and you want to get their attention, what do you do? Do you blow a whistle, or what do you do?
Personally, I never use whistles because they hurt my ears too much, and a lot of children struggle with those, particularly if you've got children with special needs. They find things like whistles can really be painful on their ears. There's different ways of doing it. One way that's very popular is to do a count of 5, 4, 3, 2, 1. So you put your hand in the air and you say quite a loud 5, and you get the children's attention. And then when you put one finger down and you say 4, sorry, I'm holding my hand up doing this and I realise you can't see me. And every time I count down, it's just a little bit quieter. With my own group of children at church now, all I actually have to do at the start, they'll be running around using up some of their energy, and I allow them to do that before we start because they have got lots of energy, so I allow them to run around a little bit. I will just stand at the front, I will put my hand in the air with my 5 fingers up, and as soon as one notices, they start telling the others, and before I get to 0, they'll be sat down ready to start without me actually having to say a word. It's a very good question, that is, Barry, and it's another thing that's a good idea is to find out what your local primary school does. If you've got links with your primary school, they will quite often have a system that they use throughout the school, which might be that 5, 4, 3, 2, 1 system. It might be, a lot of schools these days do a kind of clapping rhythm, and they get the children to do it back, and immediately they've got the children's attention. Sorry if I made you jump doing that then. So if you can find out what your primary school uses and use something similar, then the children are already used to that. But having said that, it doesn't take them long to pick something up. So
that's really
what works for you.
Yeah, really, really helpful. Thank you for answering that question. Sorry, you were going to go on to equipment, I think.
I was, yeah. When you're thinking about your venue and your facilities, think about your equipment. What do you have? What do you need? In reality, I don't think you need a huge amount to get you going. If you're thinking about doing something like a toddlers group, you probably do need a lot of equipment. If you're going to have a successful toddlers group, toddlers will move from one play equipment to another very quickly. And you need quite a few things. If you're talking about working with primary school age children, you don't actually need a huge amount. You can play a lot of games with a set of small balls and bean bags and maybe a few hoops, things that don't cost a lot of money. So again, as I say, just thinking about your age group, think about what equipment you have, what you might need to get before you start. And also, we've already mentioned this a little bit, think about your community, do your homework and find out what's happening in your community. What are you doing that's going to be different? And what are you doing that's going to be similar? The one thing that you're doing that's going to be different is that you are part of building God's kingdom. But you still need to consider what else is happening. You don't want something that's exactly the same as in the village hall. You want something that's going to be a little bit different. Find out what the children in your community enjoy doing, because if they enjoy doing something, if there's something that works in your community and you can build on that in your church, then that's a good place to start. If you ask the children anywhere what they enjoy, children want to have fun, and they are children and they should be having fun. As they grow up, life will have enough pressures and school has enough pressures of its own. Children need to have fun. Of course, all children are different and their idea of fun might not always be the same. Adults like different things, children like different things. So I'm just going to talk a little bit about a few of these things that have come up on your screen. Personally, I love doing action songs. I'm quite musical. I play the guitar, and I love doing action songs with children. A lot of the action songs that we do are based very largely on Bible verses. So in doing action songs, they are also learning verses from the Bible. They love to do things that gradually increase in speed so that their actions end up going all over the place. And my children will call out to me to go a little bit faster and things like that. Not all children enjoy action songs. I find that if they're done with enthusiasm, that the vast majority do. But you sometimes find with boys and sometimes girls, as they start to get to the top end of primary school, they suddenly start to get this idea that singing isn't cool anymore. And again, I don't find that much of an issue, but just occasionally you get them. And I always say, well, if you really don't want to join in, I'm not going to make you join in. Just don't spoil it for the other children who want to join in. Stories, we've already talked about stories, and I've already said that I'm absolutely passionate about Bible stories. I would quite happily do a webinar sometime that's just devoted to telling Bible stories and the different ways that you can do it, because I think it's something that is so important, and that will make what you do different to what other people do in other places. And if you, as I've already said, if you don't feel confident in telling Bible stories, then find some really good Bible story books, and there's a lot out there. We'll be talking a little bit about resources just before we finish this morning. But include Bible stories. What we're doing is bringing children into God's kingdom, and the starting place is with the Bible and learning verses from the Bible. When I was younger, we used to call them memory verses. I find if you talk to children who are non-churched about memory verses, if you even talk about verses from the Bible, they don't have a clue what you're talking about. I tend to say with our children now, we're learning a bit from the Bible, and we call them Bible bits rather than memory verses. But if you're going to use that word verses, make sure you explain what it means. But so many different ways of learning verses. Again, we often do it with actions. Sometimes we set them to tunes. Sometimes we set them to rhythms. So many different ways of doing it. Just recently, with the children at my weekly children's club in my church, we've learned to do a modern version of the 23rd Psalm, and we've learned to do it with sign language. I think that's been more of a challenge for me than it has for them, but they've really enjoyed doing it. And we got their parents on the week that we broke up for the summer. We got some of their parents to come in and see what we'd been learning, so they're hearing it as well, and I think they were really impressed with what we've done. I believe with the songs and the stories and the Bible verses that these go into the children's memories. And even though sometimes they might not understand the things that they're learning, I honestly believe that one day God will bring these things back to them. God will put them into their mind at a time that they really need it, that they really need Him. And I believe that God will use those. Craft. I've already talked about craft, and craft is a thing that a lot of children enjoy, but again, a lot of children don't. And I'm not going to get gender specific here. I find with ours that craft is generally more popular amongst the girls than the boys, but still a lot of the boys love it. I'm fortunate to work with a couple of people who are really good at craft, and they have really good ideas that will appeal to the boys as well as the girls. Children love playing games. There's a whole range of different games that you can play. Personally, I don't have a problem with competitive games where they're in teams playing against each other. I know that some people do. I don't, as long as not all of the games are like that. And try to make sure that not all of the games are going to be games where children are out, because it's often the same children that are out quickly. So just think of a variety of the kind of games that you can use, games where children, if they are out, they can be back in again very quickly. There are lots of books out there, secular books and Christian books, with ideas of games that you can use. Prizes. In my own children's work, we have small bands made out of shearing elastic, coloured shearing elastic, and we just put tiny beads on them, and they are made to fit around a child's wrist. We always used to have prize tokens which were made out of card, but when you see the children chewing them and sitting on them and things like that, we found that we were throwing them away quite regularly. With these bands, if they answer a question, if we see them joining in with actions, or just sitting really listening intently, anything like that, we will just give them one of these prize bands. They put it around their wrist, they forget that it's there until the end, and at the end we swap those prize bands for prizes, which are sometimes small sweets. People have different views about giving sweets out. We don't give a lot out, but they can earn sweets. We have children that save them up. We have a prize band bank, and if they get to 100 prize bands, they can earn a Bible. And we have quite a few children that really want to do that. And in between, some weeks we get out some bigger prizes so that they can spend some of the bands that they've got in their bank, which might be small toys, books, all sorts of things like that. So ask the children what they think fun is, and they will tell you. And
Can I
try to make the program fun. Yes, sorry, Barry.
I just want to very quickly come in because I know that time is running by and you've got so much to share with us. But can I just say, with all the different things, the songs, the craft, and the games, I'm sure you would say if you can coordinate those to support the story and the theme.
Absolutely, yeah.
Really important. Yeah. Okay. Sorry. Time pressing on. Carry on.
And just to quickly jump in, Barry, somebody's just mentioned about a story webinar would be good. And somebody's also asked, has anybody experience of engaging with kids through technology? So it looks like we've got ourselves a couple of webinars there to think about. One on storytelling, and on storytelling, I think about things like godly play as well, and quizzes, but also technology. Just to flag those up and just say we have heard that, and we'll make note of those questions and deal with them.
Quizzes is a word that I should have had on that last slide, Gordon. Thank you. Okay, moving on. So first things first, we've already said the most important thing to do, and I will emphasize this, is to pray. God is our greatest resource. He's there with us. He can do amazing things with small people in small places. He has done in the past, he will do in the future. But I need to touch on some of the legal obligations. As I say, these are some of the things that can put people off, and they really shouldn't put you off. I'm going to talk just briefly about safeguarding. Safeguarding, of course, is something that we have to do. Safer recruitment is something that we have to do. And when we're talking about safeguarding, we're not just talking about child protection. We are talking about ensuring that the children and the adults are safe and protected in everything that they do. You'll see those letters CCPAS there. If your church belongs to a denomination, then that denomination should have resources of all sorts that will help with safeguarding. If you don't belong to a denomination, if you're an independent church, or if your denomination is just a small one and perhaps they don't have those resources, I found CCPAS is an excellent organisation, and they're absolutely ideal for independent churches. The details about CCPAS are on the handout that you'll be downloading later. Safer recruitment. It kind of gives the impression that churches have volunteers queuing up at the door, which of course we don't. But churches do run the risk, because we will willingly accept everybody. We run the risk that we will just accept anybody who volunteers, and we have to legally, we must go through this safer recruitment process. That's about making sure that we've got references for people, making sure that we do interviews with people, and they can be just gentle interviews. We're not talking about a formal process, but making sure that people are recruited properly, and of course doing the DBS check, what used to be called the CBS, the CRB check, and previous to that it was called the police check, making sure that people are safe. We need to carry out risk assessments of our premises. Again, that doesn't have to be an onerous task. It's looking round, seeing where there might be danger, and just making sure that we've made a note of it and we've done everything that we can to reduce the possible risk. Consent forms. You may have had to do a lot of work in your churches recently about GDPR and data protection, and that's really important. But you do need to get consent forms. If children are being left in your care, then this is particularly important. Get consent forms, make sure you've got the children's details so that if there's an emergency, you can get hold of them. Again, this section is something that we could do a whole separate section on, and I'm just brushing over it very quickly today, but you can get back to me with questions about this later on if you want to. When you've been through that, you need to start to advertise and to recruit, and take the time to do good quality posters and leaflets. Just handing something out on a scrap of paper with just black and white print is not going to attract children's eyes, and it's not going to give a particularly good message to the adults either. Invest a little bit of money, invest time, and somebody that's got the ability to do this, to do something that's good quality. We use A6 size leaflets that are like postcards, and they're done on thin card. They don't cost a huge amount, and we find that's a really good way of giving them out. Use local shops to advertise. Use schools if possible. Schools will often give leaflets out for you, particularly if they know something out about you. They'll often put posters up. They might even put things in their newsletter if you've got a relationship with the schools. The best advertisement of all is word of mouth. If you're able to get a small core of children and get them really enjoying what they're doing, then they will go away and they will bring their friends, and give them an incentive to bring their friends. Say to them, if they can bring some friends with them, then they can get some of those prize bands or some little prizes. Give them an incentive to do it. But that's the best way to get children in. What are the possibilities? Well, there's things like toddler groups, sometimes called stay and play groups. That's for preschool children, where the adults will stay with them. Sunday school or junior church, something that's running alongside the services that your adults come to, running alongside for those children that come. Messy church or a similar craft-based activity. Some of you have said that you do messy church, and I've seen messy church done really well, where it's really successful in some churches. I've also seen it done where it's just a craft thing, and really there's not much emphasis on the Bible, or there's not much emphasis on church. If you're going to do messy church, then do it well and buy into the resources, and make sure that you get the message of Christianity coming out through the craft that you're doing, and through the celebration time, the time that you have together, drawing it all together. I've already talked briefly about bespoke activities for particular times of the year, so those are possibilities. Holiday clubs, they seem to have gone a little bit out of fashion in some places, but for us, holiday clubs work well. We get a good number of children that come. We get parents that try to sort out their working hours around the holiday clubs that we're running. And special events that you might be able to do, weekly clubs and weekly groups, which if you can do that, if you've got the people and the resources to do that, then they're ideal things to do. There are so many things that I would like to be able to have the time to talk more about. And as I've said, we can run webinars in the future and pick up on some of the things that you bring up. There are lots and lots and lots of resources and Christian organisations that you can draw from on the internet. Be careful. The things that you find on the internet are not all good. There are some big names. There are some smaller names that are very good too. Many of them are free, but you might have to create an account in the first place. But like I've said, there are lots out there. It's not all good. So if you're going to use the internet, set time aside and browse, find out what will suit your needs, and find out, just check up that it is really good Bible-based stuff that you're using. And having just mentioned Bible-based and talked about the Bible several times, I would like to implore you to use a version of the Bible that children can understand. You might have your favourite version, but that might be difficult for children to understand. Personally, I dip into lots of different versions of the Bible, and I often look to see which one I think has got the most child-friendly language for a particular Bible verse that I want to use with them, so that it makes it as accessible to them as possible. Child-friendly language is something that's really important to use. And of course, there's books and magazines. Sometimes these days we forget about those, but those are really important as well.
Joy, I'm just conscious that our time has really gone, and what we've heard already this morning is really helpful, and you've added some more helpful resources on the screen already, which is great. Just a couple of things, just to say, I'm quite concerned that we remember when we're using the Bible that the context of the Bible is 2,000 years, at least 2,000 years old, and in a world halfway around the world. So the cultural context is different. So you've talked about using contemporary versions and versions that work, but people need to think in terms of not losing the message in the culture of the times in which things were written. And
Yeah.
we were chatting before we started about Bob Hartman and his wonderful resources. We'll add that to the website. We can add these to the website and anything else that you want. There's a handout. If you click on your control panel, go to handout, you'll find a handout there. But Joy will work with us to provide some additional resources that will appear on our website. So all that you've seen, all you've heard will be there. The video recording will be there, and so there's quite a lot. So there's also a possibility of, and it'll come up in a survey in a few moments when we finish the webinar, of maybe having an online discussion. Joy, thank you ever so much. Do you want to just wind up for us, please?
Yeah, finally, some of these things you've already said, the resources, the survey, send us your questions, share your concerns, share your ideas and experience, visit the website, join the online discussion group, and I hope you found today helpful. Here are our contact details, and Barry will tell you a little bit more about that as we finish.
So a really big thank you to Joy. I have found it really helpful, really interesting. But looking at the survey we did, the poll we did at the beginning, some of you have got quite a lot of experience, and we'd like to tap into your experience. Joy and I would love to hear from you. If there's something that's worked well for you, then please tell us about it. So email us and let us know what that is. We'd be pleased. You can find us on Facebook, and we'd be pleased to have your link for that. I'll contact you about whether you want to have further links with us about webinars that are coming up. I think the possibility of other webinars and the online discussion could be really exciting. But we've had an awful lot today, which is really helpful. So whether you're just beginning or you're just needing to think more about what you're doing, I hope you found this really, really helpful. Please take part in the survey.